Hari. How is the spiritual master directly Hari? Is he omniscient, like the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Does he know everything? Can the spiritual master tell you your friend's phone number who lives in Washington, D.C.? No. As Srila Prabhupada explained, the spiritual master knows as much as Krishna lets him know. But his perfection is to understand that he's the eternal servant of Krishna, and he teaches that to others. Therefore, he's called Sakshat Hari. He delivers the transcendental knowledge accurately to others. So you might say, well, big deal. But it is a big deal to deliver the message as it is, because the message has potency. But we tend to think, well, it's like being a post person. The post person, the U.S. Post Office delivers the letter to your mailbox, big deal. But when you think of all the things that could go wrong, the post person could open your letters and toss out the letters or this or that, not deliver your parcels, keep the parcels for himself. But we come to rely upon the USPS delivering the post. Similarly, we should come to rely on the parampara for delivering accurately the message of Bhagavad Gita without distortion. For just doing that delivery service, someone doing the service as spiritual master is glorified as Sakshat Hari, not because they are Hari, not because they are infallible, but because they're, as Prabhupada said, their perfection is that they are preaching the bhakti knowledge. Delivering the message as it is so important that the spiritual master is considered Sakshat Hari just for being a menial servant, accurately delivering messages. Can you understand that? So the spiritual master's perfection, whether an eternally liberated soul like Srila Prabhupada or his humble servants carrying on his line, the perfection is not to be omniscient and all-knowing in the material sense. All-knowing in that you know the science of Krishna. That's no small thing. You're able to teach the science of Krishna. Therefore, on the appearance day of the spiritual master, Vyasa Puja is celebrated because the spiritual master is presenting the message of Vyasadeva. So the spiritual master is honored for presenting that message of Vyasadeva on his appearance day. So in this way, the whole parampara is glorified, because the spiritual master is just a link in the chain of parampara. So you may say, well, if it's just about delivering the message accurately, then why aren't there millions of spiritual masters? And that's the good question. Why aren't there millions? Just like when Lord Chaitanya was touring South India and he met one Brahmana who invited him to his home for lunch, and Lord Chaitanya accepted, and at the home of the Brahmana, first the Brahmana's family worshiped Lord Chaitanya with paraphernalia, and then they took the water that washed his feet and it was passed around to the whole family. And then once Mahaprabhu had finished receiving such a welcome, the Brahmana broke down and said, I can't take it anymore. This family life, the waves of the material energy, take me with you. I've had it. I want to go with you. I want to leave my family and go touring with you. And Lord Chaitanya told him, stop speaking like that. And then he explained to the Brahmana, Yare deko tare koho Krishna upadesh, ama agya guru haya tare desh. Wherever you go, whomever you meet, teach the science of Krishna. In that way, be a guru and deliver the people wherever you go. So to do that task given by Mahaprabhu doesn't mean you have to travel the world. Doesn't mean you have to travel your own country. It can mean simply in your own village, in your own family setting. It's not that everyone who wants to serve as guru has to be an internationalist. This is a big misconception. We need thousands of gurus, millions of gurus, whether they're gurus for their family, of their neighborhood, okay, of their state, of their continent, or if they happen to be able to travel the world, so be it. But Lord Chaitanya does not discriminate between someone who's a guru of just one little village, let's say Port Royal, and someone who is guru of the whole world. Both are carrying out the order of Lord Chaitanya. Wherever you go, whomever you meet. Wherever you go means it could be just across the street, this way and across the street that way. Or it could be crossing oceans, but the distance is not the factor. Maybe he means you'll never leave Bulgaria. All the Bulgarian devotees know, when I first went to Bulgaria, 1978, I was driving from the capital city, Sofia, to the coast, Varna. I stopped off in a place in the middle. We stayed overnight at someone's house who was known to be favorable. That means they just had a little interest in something exotic. But we would drive all over the country looking for such persons, because preaching in the communist bloc then was like looking for a needle in a haystack. We would hear someone in one city would tell us, in a city 8 hours away, there's someone who wears a Shiva t-shirt. So we'd jump in the car and we'd drive 8 hours. That was the biggest lead we had, you had to follow through, otherwise this is nothing. I remember driving from Warsaw to, what's that city on the Ukraine border? Przemyśl? Huh? Yes. That was a long drive, right? But we heard from someone in Warsaw, in Warsaw, that, yeah, did you know, 8 hours away, there's someone who walks around with a Shiva t-shirt. So those are the kind of leads we were pursuing. Anyway, we were traveling in Bulgaria in 1978, and we stopped off in one town, Midway. And the favorable guy, he did buy some books and some japa beads. He was a well-to-do, wealthy guy, prospering during the communist regime. But he had an old withered grandmother, hunched over, wearing those headscarves. And as we were leaving to drive away the next morning, she gave us the ultimate benediction. She said, "May you stay here and marry Bulgarian girls." She thought that was the nicest thing she could say. She just pouring her blessings upon us. Of course, we said, let's get out of here. So my point is, some persons doing the service of Guru will just be dealing with a small town, maybe even just their clan of relatives. Others will be dealing with a state, with a country, with the whole planet. But Lord Chaitanya's instruction doesn't specify the range of your service. He just says, do it wherever you go, whomever you meet. Teach the science of Krishna. Just like our famous Brajalila Devi. She's always doing online seminars. They go here, they go there, they go everywhere. Meanwhile, she's just at her house. But the message goes everywhere. So that's Lord Chaitanya's order. So Jada Bharata is simply talking to one person, Rahugana Maharaj. There's no mention in Bhagavatam that Jada Bharata was traveling around preaching. He was acting as an avaduta. But in this case, Rahugana, the king, crossed Jada Bharata's path, so to speak, falsely recruiting Jada Bharata into labor of carrying the palanquin, because Jada Bharata did look like a dumb oaf. And Rahugana's extrasensory perception, shall we say, his spiritual perception was clouded by his pride, it being the king, and also Jada Bharata's presence was clouded. He wasn't disclosing, except a little bit, his spiritual advancement. So this point about sakshadaritvena samasta shastra needs some deep thought. Someone doing the service of guiding others knows as much about them as Krishna wants him or her to know. In other words, you're dependent on Krishna. Many of you know the history of the Juhu temple, the battle Srila Prabhupada fought to get the Juhu property. Everyone knows that? Most everyone knows. You can read about it in the Srila Prabhupada Devamrita book. You can read more extensively about it in His Holiness Gita Swami's book, I'll Build You a Temple, the Juhu history. So the devotees entered into a business deal with someone who was a cheater, who was always thinking to rip them off. And it was a huge battle for a year or two, nip and tuck. Even the devotees who associate with Prabhupada directly were thinking, this is useless. We're never going to win. The land is full of rats and vermin, and the devotees are they're all getting sick. They're camped in tents on the land to hold the land so that ISKCON can't be kicked off the land. They're squatting on land that they signed a purchase deal to buy, so it's not like illegal squatting, but the owner was determined to cheat them. So it was an enormous battle for a year or two, upon which, when ended, Srila Prabhupada said, it was a good fight. It was ferocious. And then he said something very interesting. He said, normally, with my business sense, I would have known that this land seller was a cheater. But Krishna covered me over, so I would proceed with the deal. So that shows you, sakshadaritvena samasta shastra doesn't mean omniscient in terms of knowledge independent of Krishna. Krishna didn't want him to know. So he would proceed with the deal. Because as Prabhupada said, ordinarily with my business intelligence, I would have known this person's a cheater. But Krishna wanted me to go on with the deal. So that gives you an example about how the perfection is not to be omniscient. The perfection is to be Krishna's instrument. This is an important point. An exalted personality like Jada Bharata is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he fully represents the Lord by giving knowledge to others. We've got to really bang that point into our head. Because we think there's no big deal. Well, giving knowledge, what's the big deal? Just like the post person delivering the post, big deal. But what happens when you're waiting for some, especially in the days of snail mail before email, you're waiting for some crucial letter. You realize how dependent you are on the post person for accurate delivery. Jada Bharata is herein accepted as the direct representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he was imparting knowledge on behalf of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, Maharaj Rahugana concluded that it was appropriate to ask him about Atma Tattva, the spiritual science. Tad Vigyanatam Sagurum Eva Bhikachit. This Vedic injunction is also confirmed herein. If anyone is at all interested in knowing the spiritual science, Brahma Jigyasa, he must approach a guru like Jada Bharata. So I hope you remember this point. The perfection of the spiritual master is that he spreads the bhakti knowledge. Spreading the bhakti knowledge means the bhakti lifestyle, because without the lifestyle, you won't understand very much of the knowledge. Text 20. Savai bhavaloka narikshanatam avyaktalingo vicharatyapi swit yogeshvaranam gantam andhabuddhi katam vichakshita rihanubandha. Is it not a fact that your good self is the direct representative of Kapila Dev, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? To examine people and see who is actually a human being and who is not. You have presented yourself to be a deaf and dumb person. Are you not moving this way upon the surface of the world? I am very attached to family life and worldly activities, and I am blind to spiritual knowledge. Nonetheless, I am now present before you, and am seeking enlightenment from you. How can I advance in spiritual life? Purport. Although Maharaj Rahugana was playing the part of a king, he had been informed by Jada Bharata that he was not a king, nor was Jada Bharata deaf and dumb. Such designations were simply coverings of the spirit soul. Everyone must come to this knowledge. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Dehinosmin yata dehe. Everyone is encased within the body. Since the body is never identical with the soul, the bodily activities are simply illusory. In the association of such a sadhu as Jada Bharata, Maharaja Rahugana came to the awareness that his activities as a royal authority were simply illusory phenomena. He therefore agreed to receive knowledge from Jada Bharata, and that was the beginning of his perfection. That was the beginning of his perfection, his agreement to receive knowledge from Jada Bharata. Again, we would consider this beginning to be insignificant. But here we are informed. This so-called insignificant beginning is actually the beginning of perfection. The journey begins with but a single step. Perfection begins with but a single step. Therefore, we give that example of the mango, unripe and ripe. The ripe mango starts off being unripe and then gradually becomes ripe. So we're witnessing such an auspicious beginning, a complete turnabout by Maharaj Rahugana, who had some training in the Supreme Absolute Truth. And that's why he could quickly do a reversal. He slammed the car in reverse, so to speak, and is making amends. Not only is he asking for forgiveness and expressing his regret, but he's asking, please give me knowledge. I want to understand. I now present myself before you, seeking enlightenment from you. How can I advance in spiritual life? Dristashrama karmata atmanovai Bhatur guntur bhavatas chanumanye Yata sotura nanayaja bravat Samala samula isto vyavahada marga. You have said, this is Rahugana Maharaj, repeating Jada Bharata's words. You have said, I am not fatigued from labor. Although the soul is different from the body, this is Rahugana's query. You have, in other words, you've said this, Jada Bharata, you said you're not fatigued from the labor. But let me ask a question, in other words. Let me raise a point. Although the soul is different from the body, there is fatigue because of bodily labor. And it appears to be the fatigue of the soul. When you are carrying the palanquin, there is certainly labor for the soul. This is my conjecture, he admits. This is my own idea. Seems logical to me. Yes, there's a soul, and yes, there's the body, but why shouldn't what happens to the body not affect the soul? There must certainly be labor for the soul, just like there's labor for the body in carrying the palanquin. This is my conjecture. This is my own idea. You've also said that the external behavior exhibited between the master and the servant is not factual. But, although in the phenomenal world it is not factual, the products of the phenomenal world can actually affect things. Oh, he's pretty good, isn't he? That is visible and experienced. As such, even though material activities are impermanent, they cannot be said to be untrue. So the king is saying, in so many words, we can't disregard the world just because it's impermanent. The world is impactful. We can't dismiss that. Things happen on the material plane, even though the material plane is temporary, as you have said, Jada Bharata, but that temporary world produces real effects. We all know that by our experience and what we're seeing. So how can you say that material activities are untrue? But you see, the standard of Bhagavad truth is that for something to be really considered real, it has to be permanent. we give the material energy, although it's like a phantasmagoria, a shooting star in the sky, we give it credit for having a touch of reality because it emanates from the supreme reality. But if you disconnect the material energy from its source and consider that disconnected material energy to be solidly for real, you're bewildered. Its source is for real, and the material energy has some reality to it, even though it's temporary, because it emanates from the supreme reality. Just like you would never consider sunshine without the sun. I don't know, in your language, if you're in Vietnam, do they say shine? The shine is coming through my window? Where's Parameshwari? How do you refer to the sunshine in Vietnamese? Where is she? I can't see. Yes? Is there a word for sunshine, or is it just for shine? Huh?
I don't think there's a word for sunshine. There's a word for shine.
There's a word for shine. So
There's a noun, there's not a verb.
There's a noun for shine. So in my window is coming shine. You would say that in Vietnamese, yes? Huh?
Yeah, wait, there's both. There's both. Both shine and sunshine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
When you say sunshine, you're immediately recognizing the energy has a source. But only a fool would think the shine is coming through my window, and that's it. So basically, Rahugana Maharaj is having a super brilliant philosophical discussion as he's prostrate on the ground. How can it be said that just because material activities are impermanent, they're untrue? They've got to have some reality to them. You can kick this table and knock this microphone. There's truth, right? So Jada Bharata is going to skillfully deal with all these points. So just see, 1 minute, Rahugana Maharaj is cursing Jada Bharata for being a dumb oaf, a dullard, an imbecile. And the next minute, he's posing to Jada Bharata such deep questions, saying, please give me spiritual instruction. Please give me shelter. This is real culture. Stalyagni-tapat payasobitapas tattapatas tandula garbarandi dehendriyas vasaya sannikarshat tatsamsriti purushasya nirodhat. King Rahugana continued, my dear sir, you have said that designations like bodily fatness and thinness are not characteristics of the soul. That is incorrect, because designations like pain and pleasure are certainly felt by the soul. You may put a pot of milk and rice within fire, and the milk and rice are automatically heated one after another. Similarly, due to bodily pains and pleasures, the senses, mind, and soul are affected. The soul cannot be completely detached from this conditioning. This is Rahugana's conjecture. As I said a few days ago, his example of the pot of milk and rice on the fire. So he's arguing that even though the milk and rice are not the pot's containing the milk and rice, still, when you heat the pot, the milk and rice also become hot. So they affect one another. This is his argument for how material conditions must affect the soul. He accepts Atma Tattva, that there is the soul, but he has a misunderstanding that the soul is affected by physical, psychological, environmental circumstances. Jada Bharata will deal with this. He's presenting all the, remember, he's not just speculating like you meet someone who says, no, it's like this, it's like that. He's not doing that. He's presenting his conjectures for Jada Bharata's evaluation. Because he's already asked, please give me spiritual knowledge. Please, I want shelter. So he's honestly presenting his twisted ideas, which are actually quite sophisticated. So here's how Srila Prabhupada deals with it in the purport. This argument put forward by Maharaj Rahugana is correct from the practical point of view, but it arises from an attachment to the bodily conception. It can be said that a person sitting in his car is certainly different from his car. But if there is damage to the car, the owner of the car, being overly attached to the car, feels pain. Actually, the damage done to the car has nothing to do with the car's proprietor. But because the proprietor has identified himself with the interest of the car, he feels pleasure and pain connected with it. This conditional state can be avoided if attachment is withdrawn from the car. Then the proprietor would not feel pleasure or pain if the car is damaged or whatever. Similarly, the soul has nothing to do with the body and the senses, but due to ignorance, he identifies himself with the body and he feels pleasure and pain due to bodily pleasure and pain. So the resolution of this dilemma that, well, can you really say that the soul is not affected when something happens to the body? The answer is that when we're super attached, then it seems like the deepest core of our being is affected by some event which is actually external. But such a problem can be avoided if the attachment's withdrawn. As we heard, actually the damage done to the car has nothing to do with the car's proprietor, but because the proprietor has identified himself with the interest of the car, he feels pleasure and pain connected to the car. To break these points down and explain them so succinctly takes a lot of transcendental energy. Srila Prabhupada really makes it easy on us. So that we can assimilate these very deep points. So from the everyday point of view, it would seem so that designations like pain and pleasure are certainly felt by the soul. The soul is the milk and rice contained within the pot that's on the fireplace. So the pot, the container, or the body gets hot. Certainly, the milk and rice inside the pot will get hot. So similarly, the soul within the body gets affected. That's what Rahugana is saying. So to ordinary sense perception, it could seem like that. We could speculate. We can have such a conception, a conjecture. But here, we find out that this conjecture is based on attachment. Attachment to the body, the container, as the self. And therefore all kinds of hallucinations follow. And later, Jada Bharata is going to explain that the hallucinatory power comes from the false ego. When the false ego hooks up with the mind, they produce such a show. They're a Disney World, massive Disney World, producing all kinds of fantasies just by that hookup between the false ego and the mind. we'll continue. Unless there's some questions at this point. Yes.
You said that we are an instrument of Krishna.
What's that?
You said that we should be an instrument of Krishna.
That's what Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, Nimitta Matram Bhavasavasachan. Yes?
Well, what if you are away from Guru and Vaishnavas? And how do you know that you're not an instrument of Maya?
Hopefully you've been trained before you're away. You have these books, and Krishna won't penalize you if unavoidably you're away. Maybe you're in prison. Devotees have been put into prison because of their spiritual practices. Krishna's in your heart. He's not trying to make everything impossible for you. But you have to do your best, and Krishna certainly takes care of you. There's truth in that old saying that God helps those who help themselves. So if you're unavoidably isolated from devotees, Krishna takes care of you. But if you slack off when you have all opportunities and access to so much good advice, then you can't say, well, I just wanted to be me, as is so common these days. Maybe you're illiterate. You can't read, like the illiterate Brahmana in South India that Lord Chaitanya encountered. You know that. He was sitting in the temple, this illiterate Brahmana, turning the pages of Bhagavad Gita. He was doing that every day. And the others in the temple were laughing at him. What are you doing turning the pages? We know you can't read. So Lord Chaitanya came upon the scene and said to the Brahmana, the illiterate Brahmana, I see tears in your eyes. Why are there tears in your eyes when you're turning the pages? Because I've heard that you're illiterate. And the illiterate Brahmana explained, my spiritual master ordered me to read, so I'm carrying out his order. And every time I turn the pages, even though I don't understand what I'm looking at in terms of the words, on every page, I see Krishna driving the chariot of his devotee Arjuna. And when I think about how the Lord becomes subservient to his pure devotee, tears pour from my eyes. So Lord Chaitanya told him, you are the real reader of Bhagavad Gita. You illiterate Brahmana who can't read, you're the real reader because of your bhakti. Krishna's in everyone's heart. He knows when you're doing your best and when you're slacking off. Anything else? Yes.
How I know that I'm doing my best?
How do you know that you're doing your best?
If I'm doing my best.
First of all, you have to take care of your sadhana and your health. And upon that foundation, you endeavor mightily to serve Krishna. With great enthusiasm. Just like when you dance in the temple room. She's famous for her dancing. Very energetically. Every time I come, I notice she adds some new steps. Looks like you added some steps in your repertoire from the local ladies here. Have there been times in your life when you endeavored so mightily, so vigorously for some material goal? Maybe at school or at work? Or you were a pampered child? You know what a pampered child means?
No, I don't.
Anu Maduri, are you here? No.
No.
Denukari, do you know a word for pampered? Oh, spoiled child. With, grown up, with mommy and daddy giving you everything you wanted, and you never had to worry about anything or work for anything. It just all fell on your lap.
In terms of material care, they provided everything, but in terms of studying, I worked hard.
Okay, so you worked hard studying. So you have some idea of the capacity you have for sacrifice, right? So you know that you have to give at least that much of what you did for Maya. You have to give that to Krishna. I can give an example from my own life, my own little life. When I was 14, upon the insistence of my mother, I took a test for attending posh boarding schools. Just like His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he also did like that. So I received a full scholarship with living expenses also to a super posh boarding school in New Hampshire. All the richest kids in America there. And there I was from the city, and they were thinking, oh, one of these city guys, one of these minorities sent to just show that our school is broad-minded. So I was really, this was for the 10th grade in school. I was really under a lot of emotional pressure. Even though in city schools, I had straight A's, even at all academic city schools, public schools, but this place was just emotionally intense for me because I was around the richest kids in America, and they were looking at me like, what are you doing here? We know you're here because our school has to show that it's liberal. The civil rights movement is going on in America, and so we have to show that we're equal to all. So I was under such emotional pressure. And the school, you had classes 6 days a week. And there was a maximum of 8 persons to a class. So it was really high pressure, and the school measured its success on how many students graduated and went to Ivy League schools. So it was a real pressure cooker. So the first 2 months, I wasn't doing so well academically. For the first time in my life, I was under such emotional pressure, being the oddball. The school was 2,000 acres of beautiful land in the mountains of New Hampshire. The school had its own ski course. And the school had the #1 ski team for high schools, for secondary schools in the USA, because the coach of the ski team for the school was the US Olympic ski coach. So all the rich kids who loved to ski were flocking to this school. So my marks were low the first term, and so they called me in to give academic advice. They said, we think you're probably going to have to repeat your 9th grade. I never heard of such. It was a shock to me. Repeat a grade? I've already done the 9th grade. I'm here for the 10th grade. But no, you went to one of those city schools, and this is a very exclusive cream of the cream. You're going to probably have to repeat your 9th grade. We'll make a final decision in a couple of months. So I freaked out. So every night I stayed up till midnight studying. And then after 2 or 3 months of such labor, such sacrifice for such a material goal, 3 months later, they looked at me with astonishment. You're at the top of the class. What's going on? What happened? So my point is, whenever I think of sacrificing for Krishna, I know I have to give more than what I gave during that sprint I did with studies. If I don't give more than that to Krishna, I'm cheating. Yes.
For me, it seems there is a difference because
For you think there's a difference between what and what?
material endeavor is like short term.
Material endeavor is short term. No, birth after birth is a material endeavor.
I mean, this example, you're endeavoring for 3 months, but for Krishna, you're endeavoring every day, non-stop. And then it's much harder to understand what you can do, like, long term. And
Do you mean living a balanced life so you can go the distance in bhakti?
yes,
Well, that requires guidance, maturity. Just like in the early days of Sankirtan, the book distribution service at the New York Temple, the famous Brooklyn Temple, what was our schedule? This was a normal Sankirtan schedule. Out the door at 9 a.m. after breakfast, come back in the evening. And then on Fridays and Saturdays, this is the time of the big rock music period. There was always some concert at these big arenas of 20,000, 25,000 people. So on Friday and Saturday, you would go on distributing until 9 p.m. at night because the malls closed late. And then, instead of going to sleep, you would drive to the concert arenas and do concerts. Approach the people who are pouring into the arena. And then, when the thousands are seated inside, we would go inside. And we would go up and down the aisles during the concert. And I explained to you, especially our favorite spot was to position ourselves at the doorway to the bathrooms. They had these huge bathrooms, with 20 stalls, 20 urinals. And so we would wait outside the bathroom door as people were coming to enter into the massive bathroom. We would approach them. And then we got really enthusiastic, really fired up. We'd go inside the bathrooms. And as the men were at the urinals, excuse me, but... And we wouldn't get back to the temple till 2 o'clock in the morning. And then we would say, it's 2 o'clock Saturday morning. Mangal Artik will be there at 4:30. What's the point in going to sleep? So we just stay up. Go to Mangal Arti. And then we would ask the temple president, like something we thought was really, unconventional. Since we have to go out again in just a few hours, can we sleep through Bhagavatam class? Can we get some rest? He was, Oh, yeah, okay, this is quite radical, but... So we would sleep after Mangalarti ended because we had chanted our rounds between 2 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. So then we went to sleep from 5 to ate, we got 3 hours of sleep. Then breakfast time and out the door again because it's Saturday. Big shopping day. And then, of course, what happens Saturday night? More concerts. I went so many times to Madison Square Garden in Manhattan for concerts. There was a place on Long Island, the Nassau Coliseum, so many times. And then Sunday would come around. So we'd only go out part of the day, Sunday. But the Sankirtan leader would tell us, okay, who wants to be in Maya? Who wants to come back early for the Sunday feast? I don't want to be in Maya. Of course we wanted to come back for the Sunday feast. So obviously the health wasn't going to last long in those circumstances. But we were young. Prabhupada was the only adult back then. After a couple of years, things mellowed. We heard from the book distributors from the West Coast that it's good to take a day off every week just for reading. Wow, what a relief. I remember just the volumes of Bhagavatam were smaller back then, and I remember getting third canto, volume 2, its first publication, and just reading the whole volume in one day from morning till night on my day off. So gradually devotees began to realize they have to take care of their health and their energy so they can go the distance. After 2 years of that kind of lifestyle, my body was finished, and so I had to go to the BBT just at the time when Prabhupada was complaining vigorously about why the BBT is not keeping up with his book production pace. While I was at the BBT doing desk work, doing the final checks on the books before they're sent to the printer, that meant I had to read from morning to night, sometimes 12 hours a day, checking for mistakes. It's like taking a physics exam from morning to night, day after day after day. You can't doze off. But when you would go for breakfast, what would the LA temple serve every morning for breakfast? Halava and sweet rice. And then what would it serve for lunch? Deep fried white flour breadsticks, that thick. Deep fried in ghee. Sabjis, deep fried in ghee with lots of big chunks of potatoes, carrots. And then you're supposed to go back to your desk and stay awake and read manuscripts to make sure there are no mistakes. Those were the days. So after a year and a half of that, I had a bright idea. I went to the BBT trustee, and who was in charge, and I said, look, I have to read 12 hours a day sometimes, and I can't fog out, I can't go to sleep, I've got to be sharp. Can you arrange that for lunch I can just have steamed vegetables and chapatis? So, ooh, this is really radical. So he found some householder couple that would give me the luxuries of steamed vegetables and chapatis, but it was considered very radical then. He's not taking the deep fried breadsticks. He's not taking the deep fried sabjis with huge chunks of potatoes and carrots. What about the halva and sweet rice every morning? You're supposed to take prasad to your full satisfaction. Those were the days. As I said, Prabhupada was the only adult. But if I, looking back though, yes, we could have been wiser, but if we hadn't given all our youthful energies to Krishna service, what would we have done with those energies? So Prabhupada knew that. Just engage them in devotional service until some common sense develops. All right, any other questions? Yes.
Very much. I hope to ask you a question only if you consider it appropriate to answer. That, I heard about Lord Chaitanya has a very, sounds like very liberal definition of giving shiksha. How do we reconcile that with what in ISKCON can be considered pretty formulaic and conditional diksha?
What do you mean by that?
There's some who would say that it's that the method of diksha is opposed to the very liberal form of shiksha, which we've seen in some Shastras.
Well, we see that Srila Prabhupada, before he departed, did not give everyone the authority to do so. He did make judgments. Let me tell you something which may sound very strange. These days, everyone's got something to say about everything. So take your pick. But since you're asking me, I'll tell you the truth. It is fact that Srila Prabhupada had a standard that he applied, and some he accepted and some he didn't. So therefore, carrying that factor of discrimination forward, there is some kind of system. System means what? Some will agree and some won't agree. So that's as fairly as I can present the subject matter. You may have your opinion, someone else may have another opinion. As soon as there's a system, there'll be some who agree and some who don't agree. So the poor GBC persons have the wonderful, beloved task of drawing the line somewhere. And there's no doubt when you draw a line, some are going to not agree and some will agree. And others in the middle won't care. It's tough. You step left, you're criticized. You step right, you're criticized. So remember, as soon as there's some kind of system, some kind of managemental system for a global mission, especially, there are those who will agree with the system and there will be those who don't. And there'll be those in the middle who don't care. So in this way, life goes on. The miracle is that in spite of all the variegatedness, that the International Society for Krishna Consciousness has somehow stuck together, fulfilling Prabhupada's desire. There have been tough times, there have been massive disagreements, but somehow or other, the ship has remained afloat. So you have to give some credit for that. Maybe one day you'll be responsible for helping to keep the ship afloat. Relish your independent status now while you can. I remember I was blissfully walking and chanting in Mayapur, and His Holiness Shivaram Maharaj comes up to me and says, "You know, you look too happy. You ought to be a GBC." And then after that, I had a very vivid dream of Srila Prabhupada. He was coming toward me with a book in his hand. And I was thinking, oh, wow, more of the 10th canto directly from Srila Prabhupada. So he was holding the book toward me, and I went, and then he took the book and put it behind his back and said, GBC. Doesn't get any more pointed than that. Of course, the question is, how much of my life should I be beholden to that instruction? Is it eternal, or is it just for a few years, for a few decades? That I'm thinking about. Anything else? Yes.
When you were describing the static service in the early days of ISKCON, I was wondering, how do we develop that level of determination to keep doing service like that?
I wanted to please Srila Prabhupada. I wanted to please my spiritual master. I remember on those Saturday mornings when after 3 hours sleep, we get back into the vehicles and drive off to the shopping centers to be there when the shopping centers opened up at, to be there at 10 a.m. to catch the morning rush. And back then we would just pack young men and young women in the same vehicle. So there we were packed in the back seat. Brahmachari here, a lady in the middle, another man on the other side, or another lady on the other side. And, we've got a few rounds left. On our way to the Sankirtan spot, we're chanting. Meanwhile, I remember the Mataji next to me is dozing off on my shoulder. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Those were the days. Yes. It was exciting back then, but it was also a bit wild. Anything else? Yes. You'll have to speak very loudly.
So, when we chant japa, I understand that it's important for us to chant attentively.
When you chant japa, you say, you understand it's important to chant attentively.
Yes. But I was wondering, I've also heard that we should also chant with perfection. So I was wondering, if we chant attentively, does this also mean that we're chanting with affection?
Chanting with attention means affection, at least because to chant with attention means you're showing you care. Just like when you listen to someone attentively, that shows you care. And the person is impressed, is touched. Of course, affection has a big range, So at least understand that by showing attention, you're being affectionate because you're caring. You're being sensitive. And of course, there's a whole other realm of what affection is. But it certainly begins by paying attention, giving quality time. How many of you have heard that expression said to you? I just want quality time. Anyone? Sri Galoka, you've never heard that? Yes, he's nodding his head. That's another way of saying I want affection. I want to know that you're listening to me, that you're giving me the time of day, that you're focusing on what I'm saying, and you're understanding how I feel. Give me that attention, meaning give me that affection. Give me the quality time. So when you chant Hare Krishna with attention, that is at least the beginning of affection. And that affection culminates into what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Tesam satayuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. Priti, affection, to those who constantly serve me with affection. Priti, I give them the intelligence how to come to me. This is personalism. Krishna will reciprocate. You serve me constantly with affection, I reward you with intelligence how to deepen your relationship with me. Okay? Anything else? These are wonderful questions. Yes?
Very much. Regarding the verse we read, Prabhupada quoted that Sakshat Darituena.
Mhm.
How do we understand? It seems like maybe sometimes gurus have different opinions or styles. So how to understand that they're all representatives?
Details can differ, but about tattva, the science of Krishna, basically it's the same. But Nectar Devotion tells you details can vary. Now you might say about very esoteric matters of the spiritual realm, sometimes the greatest acharyas seem to have different perceptions. But that's because the subject matter is so inconceivable, it can't be just fit into a neat and tidy box that our time and space constrained brains can accommodate. We see contradiction, but actually you're just looking at the transcendental reality from different aspects. So therefore, in the commentaries of the acharyas, you may see what apparently are different aspects cited, which you might think is a contradiction, seen from your low level, but from a high level, the apparent contradictions are easily resolved. You can read in Chaitanya Charitamrita, who is Haridas Thakur? Some say he's Brahma, so he's called Brahma Haridas. Others say he's Prahlad Maharaj. Others say he's someone else's name I can't remember, as stated in Gaura Ganadesh Deepika. Then you read in Brihad Bhagavatamrita by Sanatana Goswami, he explains how different personalities can inhabit the same personality. Just like, who is Srup Damodar? Who is Ramananda Roy? Is Ramananda Roy Arjuna of the Pandavas? Or is he Vishaka? Who is he? And then you read that it's possible all these things, all these identities can be. So yes, the bhakti knowledge is mind-blowing. So Jiva Goswami says the first thing you have to accept about the Supreme Absolute Truth is that it is inconceivable. But perhaps you're referring to nothing so esoteric as that. You're referring to...
Yeah, more...
Should I plant tomatoes or should I plant peppers? Or should I be in the garden in the midday sun and show my surrender? Or should I do the gardening when the sun is not so hot? So devotee X says, no, just get out there in the hot sun. You're not the body. A devotee Y says, just find the part of the day that's not so hot so you can go on with the service day after day. Is that what you're referring to?
Something in between.
That was a cop-out answer. Said something in between. Or what? What's in between? To marry or not to marry?
Like it seems like different gurus maybe stress different things more, or but maybe even more impactful is some gurus might say, okay, just engage according to your nature, engage in something that's more comfortable.
Okay, engage according to your nature, engage in something more comfortable. Now, what is your nature? You tell me. Yes, that's the problem. Why not be the eternal servant of Krishna, and gradually everything will become revealed? Gradually, what is more comfortable for your psychophysical nature will be revealed. It may not be apparent straight away. Maybe someone like you can do many things. Maybe not. I always loved to read since a little child. I learned how to read when I was 3 years old. My mother said that when I was a little baby, before I could walk, I would crawl on the floor toward bookshelves and try to pull the books off the shelf. So when I joined the New York Temple, my idea was I'll just read books all day and eat Mahaprasad. And after 3 weeks of sweeping the floor, that was my first service. They just said, here's a broom, your service is to sweep the floor. After 3 weeks of that, I would go out on the Harinam party once a week from the temple. And at that time they had spiritual sky incense. It was a big business for ISKCON. It was the #1 incense company in the USA. And so during the chanting of the Harinam party, I would approach people with incense packs. And one day I sold a lot of incense. So the temple president was watching. He came up to me. You are a full-time Sankirtan devotee. I said, oh no. I'm a shy person. Now I have to go approach people with books. This is not me. This is not my propensity. I really disliked the service, but I was determined to love it as much as I disliked it. That was my emotional dynamic. I detested the service simultaneously with longing, praying to love it. I wanted to please Srila Prabhupada. So, you know the story. For practically 7 days a week, I went out distributing books without practically doing anything. Practically no results. In the Brooklyn Temple, they had a nickname for me. They called me the hard luck kid. I just couldn't distribute books, although I would try all day long. For 2 years, it was like that. And then one day, my godbrother Bhigupati remembers clearly, one day, everything changed from one moment to the next. I was in a parking lot of the Woodbridge Mall outside of New York City. And I suddenly started distributing so many books. I couldn't believe it. One after the other, one after the other, one after the other. I remember Bhrigupati, you know Bhrigupati, right? He came running over from the other side of the parking lot. What's going on? Do you have some new mantra you haven't been telling us? What's your secret? I said, I don't know, but I know one thing is for sure. It's not me. After 2 years of nothing, There's no way I can think that I'm the doer. So then every day after that, I used to float out the door on Sankirtan. I want to do this the rest of my life. All I have to do is do this service the rest of my life, and I'll easily go back to Godhead. I had it all worked out, you see? But then the physical took its toll on me, and the health was disappearing, and I thought this is the greatest tragedy, because I loved doing book distribution. So my health broke down right at the time when Prabhupada was very angry that his books were not coming out quickly enough. But I didn't want to change. Devotees of the temple were telling me, you just lay on the floor and cough all day, and then you pick yourself off the floor and go out for 2 hours, come back and lay on the floor and cough for the rest of the day. You got to change your service. I said, no, I cannot change my service. All other services are Maya. Only book distribution is the solution. I remember the last book I distributed at Port Authority Bus Terminal, New York, as a full-time Sankirtan devotee. There was a person walking by as far away as this microphone stand is. That's about 3 feet. I had to pray to Krishna, can I please cross this distance of 3 feet to approach the person with the Bhagavatam? And the person took the book, and then I just knew, I can't go on like this. But remember, in the beginning I thought, this is not my propensity. Why am I doing this? And at the end, I love it. I can't give it up. So how much do we know? Gradually, for a sincere devotee, it'll become more apparent what is the propensity, what's the best way to serve Krishna. But in the meantime, whatever service we do is a gateway to pleasing Krishna, to pleasing the parampara. So let us not be so quick and hasty to think we know even what is our material propensity. That may take some time to manifest. Just like for children, it takes a while before, in traditional Vedic society, the spiritual master or the brahmanas of the village identify the child's occupational propensity. It may take some time. Of course, in Vedic society, generally, if it's a family of brahmanas and they conceive children through garbhadan samskar, generally their children are brahmanas. Or if they're kshatriyas, the children are kshatriyas. Because everything is so stable and ordered in Vedic society. So the reproduction is not willy-nilly. Things go bump in the dark. Everything is very planned and orchestrated. And so the family lines maintain the same characteristics, the same psychophysical characteristics. But it's not like that these days. Even in India today, you have family lines that are very famous for having very saintly Brahmana children, and family lines that are very famous for having powerful Kshatriya children or Vaishya children. But it's getting more and more mixed now as Kali Yuga progresses. So my point is that even what your material propensity is, or propensities, because often it's mixed, what they are is not something that can be immediately determined. But in the meantime, we want to serve Krishna. And if we engage in devotional service with sincerity, how can we go wrong? All right? Okay. Any last question? I see in the back. Who is that? Oh, Devaki Preeti. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for your class. I had a question. How can we keep our consciousness strong even when the body gives us difficulty?
That's a good question. How can we keep our consciousness strong even when the body gives us difficulty? Yes, such challenging times make us think, what will I be like at the time of death? It's very good if you can develop an attachment for hearing and chanting and serving Krishna while you're healthy, so that when you're physically impaired, you still want that nectar of devotional service and hearing and chanting. And so you rise above such impediments. Even though it's not easy, it's a day-to-day struggle, but Krishna's in your heart. He sees how much you're trying. We just want to convince Krishna that we're giving our effort. Krishna is not an impossible person to please. We do the best we can in all conditions of health. All we can do is our best. We should take care of our health. First things first, sadhana and health must be taken care of. But yes, this body will break down sooner or later. You're young now, but the youth is not going to last forever. So now, while you're healthy, why not invest a big effort? I'm sure you do. Invest a big effort in becoming attached to devotional service, which is based on hearing and chanting about Krishna, and then we want to engage all our senses in Krishna's service. Do that while you're healthy. That's Prahlad Maharaj's advice. Komara acharet pragyo dharman bhagavatanaha. From the very beginning of life, not when you're old and gray and broken down, but from the very beginning when you're young and healthy, engage in devotional service. Then you have some momentum built up to carry you through the physically challenging times. And yes, it is not easy when there's a physical challenge. Just like mothers, any lady who chants 16 rounds while raising a child, I consider them to be glorious. Because it's so easy not to do that. So many excuses are possible. But those ladies who want to keep their vow, even though the child is keeping them up 24/7, and they still chant their rounds, somehow or other they chant. They sometimes say to me, oh, the quality is not good. I say, I am so impressed, and I'm sure Krishna is, he's in your heart. He's so impressed that you're trying. That was a good question. Thank you. Last one. You're ending this weekend.
You told me to chant carefully.
I told you to chant carefully. I tell everyone that.
So I was just wondering because what does that mean to
don't mix the words together so that you can't distinguish the syllables. Chant the syllables distinctly, at least so you can hear the distinction. Maybe others around you can't, but make sure you can hear this, each word pronounced carefully. Not nix, nix, llama, llama. Okay? So yes, let us all chant carefully and attentively. Hare Krishna, thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.